In the grim darkness of the far future, there are tombs that walk, ancient warriors sealed within mechanical sarcophagi, preserved in stasis for millennia, waiting for the call to battle that may never come. And in this same merciless galaxy, there exist Xenos creatures whose entire existence revolves around scavenging, fighting, and turning the detritus of war into crude weapons of their own. When these two forces collide, when curious green hands pry at the shell of a sleeping giant, the result is a story that encapsulates everything that makes Warhammer 40,000 such a rich and brutal setting. Imagine a Dreadnought, one of the Adeptus Astartes' most revered war machines, that has slumbered in darkness for 6,000 years. 6 millennia of silence, of dreams, of waiting. The warrior within has survived the Horus heresy, fought in campaigns whose names have been lost to time, witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. This ancient hero has been sealed away in a fortress, monastery's deepest vaults, or perhaps left behind on a dead world when his chapter was forced to flee, or entombed within a space hulk that tumbled through the warp for countless centuries. Whatever the reason, this venerable warrior has been forgotten, lost to the endless churn of imperial bureaucracy and the chaos of constant warfare. Now picture a warband of Orks, those green-skinned savages who live only for battle and the joy of a good scrap. They're poking through ruins, as Orks are wont to do, looking for anything shiny, anything that might explode, anything that could be looted and repurposed into something even more dangerous. And there, buried beneath layers of dust and debris, they find something that makes their eyes light up with greedy excitement. A hulking metal shell covered in ornate designs and sacred seals, bristling with weapon mounts and crackling with dormant energy. They don't know what it is, not exactly, but they know it's valuable, they know it's powerful, and they know they want it. What happens next is a collision of cultures so fundamentally different that they might as well be from separate realities. On one side, we have the pinnacle of imperial technology and martial tradition, a warrior who has given everything in service to the emperor of mankind, preserved beyond death itself. On the other, we have Xenos savages who view the universe through a lens of brutal simplicity, creatures for whom technology is as much about belief as it is about engineering. The meeting of these forces creates a situation that is simultaneously tragic, comedic, and utterly violent. This scenario allows us to explore some of the most fascinating aspects of Warhammer 40,000 lore. We'll delve into what it means to be a Dreadnought, to exist in that twilight state between life and death, to wake from centuries of slumber into a galaxy that has moved on without you. We'll examine the Ork mindset, their unique relationship with technology, and the way their collective psychic field allows them to accomplish engineering feats that should be impossible. We'll witness the inevitable violence that erupts when these two forces meet, and we'll consider the various ways such an encounter might end. But more than that, we'll see what this scenario tells us about the nature of the 40k universe itself. This is a setting where even death doesn't grant you peace, where ancient heroes are awakened to fight battles they were never meant to see, where Xenos hordes gleefully tear apart sacred relics in search of salvage. It's a universe of eternal war, of tragedy piled upon tragedy, of dark humor found in the most unlikely places. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the image of Ork mech boys hammering away at a Dreadnought sarcophagus, while the ancient warrior within begins to stir from his long sleep. So let's explore this scenario in all its grim detail. Let's understand what both sides bring to this encounter, how it might unfold, and what it means for both the entombed Space Marine and the Orks who've stumbled upon him. This is a story about duty and obsession, about technology and belief, about warriors who cannot rest and savages who cannot be stopped. This is what happens when Orks find a Dreadnought that's been asleep for 6,000 years. The living dead, understanding Dreadnoughts. To truly grasp the horror and tragedy of our scenario, we must first understand exactly what a dreadnought is. These are not merely vehicles or weapons platforms. They are living tombs, walking sarcophagi that house the barely living remnants of Space Marine heroes who were too valuable to let die, but too damaged to ever truly live again. The process of becoming a dreadnought begins with catastrophic injury. A Space Marine, already among the most durable warriors in the galaxy, must suffer wounds so severe that even the chapter's apothecaries cannot save him through conventional means. We're talking about injuries that would kill a Clesatum Tiran, normal human, instantly and several times over. Perhaps the warrior's spine was shattered by an Ork power claw, or his torso was melted away by a plasma blast, or his body was crushed beneath rubble during a building collapse. Whatever the cause, the damage is absolute. There's no putting this warrior back together in any meaningful way. But the Imperium, in its grim pragmatism, has found a use for such grievously wounded heroes. If the warrior's mind remains intact, if his spirit still burns with the desire to serve, then he can be granted what the chapters call the highest honor. The Tech Marines and apothecaries will extract what remains of his body, reducing it to the absolute minimum needed to sustain life. The organic component that results is barely recognizable as human. It's a shriveled mass of vital organs, brain tissue, and the essential parts of the nervous system, all suspended in amniotic fluid within an armored sarcophagus. This sarcophagus becomes the warrior's new body. Through a neural interface called a mind impulse unit, his consciousness is directly linked to the dreadnought's systems. He can control the massive walker as if it were his own flesh, commanding its limbs, weapons, and sensors through thought alone. But this connection comes at a terrible price. The warrior no longer feels anything in the way he once did. There's no sensation of touch, no warmth of the sun on his skin, no taste of food or drink. His entire existence is filtered through mechanical sensors and translated into data his brain can interpret. Imagine waking to find yourself encased in metal, unable to move anything but this towering mechanical body. You cannot feel your hands, because you no longer have hands, only weapon mounts and power fists. You cannot breathe naturally, because your lungs are filled with thick amniotic fluid that sustains you but offers no comfort. Every sensation is artificial, processed through systems that were never meant to replace human experience. You are alive, technically, but you are also irrevocably dead to the world you once knew. The psychological toll of this existence is staggering. The Codex Astartes tells us that extended neural interface with a dreadnought causes immense mental stress. Warriors interred within these machines suffer from lethargy, confusion, dyschronometria, which is the loss of time perception, and in extreme cases, senility. The longer a warrior remains active within his dreadnought, the more his mind begins to fray under the strain of being permanently connected to such a vast and complex machine. This is why dreadnoughts are not kept active continuously. When they're not needed for battle, the Tech Marines place them into stasis sleep, a state of suspended animation that preserves both the machine and the warrior within. During this sleep, the dreadnought is placed in the chapter's deepest vaults, in chambers that are treated as sacred shrines. The Tech Marines tend to these sleeping giants with reverent care, anointing them with sacred oils and unguents, chanting the litanies of preservation, maintaining the life support systems that keep the entombed warrior alive. But sleep for a dreadnought is not like sleep for the living. It's not rest in any meaningful sense. It's a void, a darkness so complete that when the warrior finally awakens, he often wonders if he ever truly existed during the intervening time. Centuries can pass in what feels like an instant. The warrior might go to sleep after a battle in the 35th Millennium and wake to find himself in the 41st, with everything he knew turned to dust and legend. For our scenario, we're dealing with a dreadnought that has slept for 6,000 years. To put that in perspective, that's longer than all of recorded human history before the age of technology. This warrior potentially fought during the Horus Heresy itself, or in the dark days immediately following it. He might have been interred during the Great Scouring, when the Emperor's loyal sons hunted the traitor legions across the galaxy. He's witnessed events that have become myth even to other space marines. When such an ancient warrior awakens, the disorientation is almost beyond comprehension. The galaxy he knew is gone. The brothers he fought alongside are dead, their names carved in memorial halls or forgotten entirely. The enemies he battled may have evolved into new and stranger forms. Technologies he took for granted may have been lost. The very chapter he served may have changed beyond recognition, split into successor chapters, or fallen to chaos, or been declared excommunicate traitorous. Ancient dreadnoughts are called venerable for a reason. These warriors have fought in thousands of battles over the course of centuries or even millennia. They are the keepers of their chapter's history, living links to its founding and earliest days. Their memories, when they can access them clearly through the fog of time and stasis, sleep, contain invaluable knowledge. They remember tactics used in battles that are now legend. They knew heroes whose deeds are sung in chapter litanies. They fought on worlds that no longer exist. But with age comes tragedy. The older a dreadnought becomes, the more time he spends in stasis, the more his human memories begin to fade. The faces of his battle brothers blur together. The details of specific campaigns dissolve into a general haze of violence and duty. Even his own name can begin to feel like it belongs to someone else, some distant figure from a life he can barely recall. He becomes less a person and more a weapon, a tool of war that happens to contain the ghost of a man. This process of dehumanization is both necessary and horrifying. It's necessary because without it, the psychological torment of existing as a dreadnought for millennia would drive any warrior insane. The gradual erosion of human emotion and memory serves as a kind of mercy, allowing the warrior to continue functioning when everything human in him should have broken long ago. But it's horrifying because it means that eventually nothing of the original person remains except the drive to fight, to serve, to kill the Emperor's enemies. Some dreadnoughts maintain their clarity for extraordinary lengths of time. Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves, the oldest living dreadnought in the Imperium, has been in service for over 10,000 years. He personally knew Primarch Leman Russ, fought in the Horus Heresy as a flesh and blood warrior, and remembers the Emperor before his internment upon the Golden Throne. But Bjorn is an exception, a warrior of such incredible will that he's managed to hold on to his identity through the millennia. Most dreadnoughts are not so fortunate. For our 6,000-year-old sleeper, the question becomes, what kind of warrior will he be when he awakens? Has he managed to maintain his sense of self through the long dark, or has he eroded into something more machine than man? Does he remember why he fights? Or does he simply know that fighting is all he has left? These questions will determine not just how he responds to finding himself surrounded by orcs, but whether he's capable of understanding the tragedy of his situation at all. The dreadnought's armament is equally important to understanding this scenario. These are not lightly armed machines. A standard Castroferum pattern dreadnought, the most common type in the 41st millennium, typically mounts an assault cannon or twin-linked lascannon on one arm and a close combat weapon, usually a power fist, on the other. Some variants carry missile launchers, plasma cannons, or multi-melters. Ironclad dreadnoughts, optimized for close combat, feature reinforced armor and specialized melee weapons like seismic hammers and chain fists. Older patterns are even more formidable. Contemptor pattern dreadnoughts, which were common during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, but are now rare relics, feature atomantic shielding technology and can mount weapons like heavy conversion beamers. Leviathan pattern siege dreadnoughts are walking fortresses, bristling with storm cannons and grave flux bombards. Our 6,000-year-old sleeper could be any of these patterns, each with its own strengths and capabilities. The armor protecting a dreadnought is likewise formidable. These machines are built to withstand punishment that would destroy tanks. Ceramite and adamantium plating several inches thick covers the vital systems, with the sarcophagus itself protected by the thickest armor of all. The Dreadnought can shrug off bolter fire, withstand less cannon strikes, and keep fighting even after suffering damage that would disable lesser war machines. Only concentrated anti-armor firepower, sustained assault by multiple enemies, or a lucky shot to a critical system can bring one down. But perhaps the most important thing to understand about Dreadnoughts is that despite all this protection, despite all this firepower, the warrior within is fundamentally vulnerable. His organic components, suspended in their amniotic fluid, can only survive if the life support systems remain functional. Breach the sarcophagus, disrupt the power supply, damage the neural interface, and the warrior dies, truly and finally. This is why Dreadnoughts are so ferociously protected by their battle brothers, and why the loss of one is mourned as deeply as the death of any hero. So when we imagine our ancient warrior sleeping in his tomb for 6,000 years, we must picture all of this complexity. We must see the shriveled organic component floating in its armored womb, the vast and intricate systems keeping it alive, the weapons waiting to be activated, the sensors ready to drink in information. We must understand that this is not just a machine, but a warrior who has given everything, who has sacrificed his humanity itself in service to the Emperor. And we must recognize that, when he finally wakes, it will be to a nightmare of confusion, violence, and xeno-savagery that he could never have anticipated. The Green Tide. Understanding Orks. To understand what happens when Orks encounter our sleeping Dreadnought, we must delve into the psyche of these green-skinned Xenos and examine what makes them fundamentally different from every other race in the galaxy. Orks are not merely savage warriors or simple brutes. They are a species whose entire existence is defined by violence, whose technology works through a combination of crude engineering and collective psychic belief, and whose culture revolves around the pursuit of a good fight above all else. Orks are genetically engineered weapons, created millions of years ago by the Old Ones during the war in heaven. They were designed as the perfect soldiers, expendable shock troops who could reproduce rapidly, survive in almost any environment, and fight with suicidal courage. The Old Ones succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, creating a species that has outlived its creators and spread across the entire galaxy. In the 41st millennium, Orks are probably the most numerous intelligent species in existence, found on countless worlds and always eager for the next battle. The Ork life cycle is unlike that of any other species. They reproduce through spores, released continuously throughout their lives, but especially upon death. These spores fall to the ground and grow into a fungal ecosystem that produces first squigs, small aggressive creatures that serve as food and beasts of burden, then snotlings who cultivate the fungus, then Gretchen who build crude structures and serve as slaves, and finally, Orks themselves. This means that wherever Orks go, they create a self-sustaining ecosystem that can regenerate even after the original warband is destroyed. A single Ork dying on a planet can lead to an infestation that takes generations to eradicate. But what truly sets Orks apart is their relationship with psychic energy. Orks lack individual psychic power in the way that human psykers or elder warlocks possess it. Instead, they generate a collective gestalt field known as the War, a term that serves multiple purposes in Ork culture. This psychic field grows stronger as more Orks gather together and as they become more excited, particularly during battle. It allows Orks to instinctively recognize who is bigger and therefore in charge, creating a hierarchy based purely on physical dominance and combat prowess. More remarkably, and this is crucial to understanding what happens when Orks encounter the Dreadnought, the WAG field appears to warp reality itself to match Ork beliefs. If enough Orks believe that red vehicles go faster, then red vehicles actually do go faster when Orks are driving them. If Orks believe that a weapon will work, it will work, even if the engineering is so crude that it should fall apart immediately. This isn't unlimited reality. Manipulation. There are limits to what the WAG can accomplish, but it explains how Ork technology functions despite appearing to violate basic physics. This brings us to the mech boys, the Ork specialists, who will play a central role in our scenario. Mech boys are born with an innate genetic understanding of engineering and mechanics. This knowledge isn't learned. It's hard-coded into their DNA by the old ones millions of years ago. A mech boy instinctively knows how to build guns, vehicles, and crude but functional war machines. They understand principles of engineering on a gut level that would take a human years to study. However, mech boys are not precision craftsmen. They're jovially imprecise, content to weld, rivet, and hammer away at chunks of scrap until they have something resembling a working device. An Ork shooter, their basic firearm, is literally slapped together from whatever parts are available. It shouldn't work by any reasonable standard of engineering, but it does work, because the mech boy who built it believes it will work, and the WH40 field makes that belief reality. Big mechs, the most skilled and important mech boys, are capable of truly impressive feats of engineering. They can generate custom force fields, build massive war machines called stompers and gargants, and create weapons like the infamous shock attack gun, which teleports snotlings directly into enemy armor. These devices work through a combination of actual engineering and the WH40 field's reality warping effects. A big mech's creations function better than those of lesser mech boys, not just because they're better built, but because the big mech's authority and confidence generates a stronger psychic field around his work. Looting is fundamental to Ork culture, in a way that goes beyond simple scavenging. Orks are obsessed with shiny bits, with taking the weapons and vehicles of their enemies and repurposing them for their own use. After every battle, gangs of looters will swarm over the battlefield, stripping anything of value. Damaged enemy vehicles are dragged back to mech workshops, where they're hammered into something vaguely Orky. Imperial tanks become looted wagons, covered in crude armor plating and festooned with extra weapons. Even titans have been known to fall to Ork looters and be turned into massive gargants. The looting process reveals much about Ork psychology. When mech boys work on captured technology, they don't try to understand it in the way a tech priest would. They don't study its principles or reverse engineer its systems. Instead, they simply tear out anything they don't understand and replace it with something they do. If a captured tank has a complicated targeting system, they'll rip it out and install a simpler firing mechanism that just points where the Ork is looking. If the engine is too complex, they'll replace it with a bigger, louder one that runs on crude fuel and belches black smoke. This is important because it means that when Orks encounter something like our ancient Dreadnought, they won't approach it with reverence or caution. They won't try to preserve it or study it carefully. They'll see it as a source of valuable parts and will immediately start trying to pull it apart. The fact that it might be a sacred relic, a living tomb housing a warrior who fought in battles thousands of years before they were spawned, means nothing to them. It's just another shiny bit to be looted. Ork society is organized around violence in a way that can be hard for humans to comprehend. Orks don't just enjoy fighting, they need it. Battle is when they feel most alive, most fulfilled. The roar of guns, the clash of close combat, the thrill of facing a worthy opponent. These are the experiences that give meaning to Ork existence. An Ork who goes too long without a good scrap becomes surly and difficult, picking fights with his fellow Orks just to get some action. This need for violence is what drives Ork expansion across the galaxy. When a particularly large and successful Ork war boss begins to gather followers, word spreads through the WH40 field, drawing more Orks to his banner. What starts as a warband becomes a horde, which becomes a WH40, a crusade of violence that can consume entire sectors. The largest WH40s in history have numbered in the billions of Orks, sweeping across worlds like a green tide, destroying everything in their path before finally dissipating when they run out of enemies or their war boss is killed. But Orks are not mindless berserkers. They're cunning in their own way, capable of strategy and tactics that serve their brutal purposes. Blood axes. Orks even practice stealth and ambush tactics, though they find such un-Orky behavior distasteful. Ork commandos can infiltrate enemy positions, though they usually give themselves away because they can't resist the urge to stab someone. The point is that orcs, for all their savagery, are thinking beings with a culture, social structures, and the capacity to adapt to new situations. When it comes to dealing with advanced technology they don't understand, orcs follow a simple philosophy. Hit it until it does what you want. If that doesn't work, hit it harder. If it breaks, weld it back together and hit it again. This approach is surprisingly effective given the Warfield's influence. An orc can literally beat a piece of technology into submission. His belief that sufficient violence will make it work, becoming reality through psychic force. The orcs who find our ancient Dreadnought will likely be part of a larger warband engaged in some campaign or another. Perhaps they're looting a dead world, searching for scrap to fuel their wag. Maybe they've crashed on a space hulk and are exploring its depths. Or they could be raiding an abandoned Imperial facility, looking for weapons and vehicles to steal. Whatever the circumstances, they're in the right place at the right time to stumble upon something that will change their day dramatically. The warband probably includes a mix of orc types, boys, the rank and file warriors who make up the bulk of any orc force, always eager for a fight. Knobs, larger and more experienced orcs who serve as squad leaders. Looters, specialists in acquiring enemy equipment, who will be especially interested in the Dreadnought. And crucially, at least one mech boy or big mech, drawn by rumors of advanced Imperial technology in the area. These orcs have probably fought Space Marines before. They might even have encountered Dreadnoughts in battle, witnessed these walking tanks grinding through their lines with crushing power fists and roaring assault cannons. But they've never seen one inactive, never had the chance to examine one up close without it trying to kill them. The opportunity to loot such a prize will be irresistible. Understanding orc psychology is key to predicting how they'll react to the sleeping Dreadnought. They won't be afraid of it, not initially. Fear isn't really in the orc emotional range when it comes to potential fights. They'll be excited, curious in their crude way, and immediately begin planning how to crack it open and see what's inside. They'll argue among themselves about the best approach, with different orcs suggesting different methods based on their experience and temperament. The mech boy will be particularly interested. To a mech, the Dreadnought represents a treasure trove of advanced technology. The life support systems, the neural interface, the weapons systems, the armor plating, all of it can be looted and repurposed. He'll probably start taking measurements, tapping on the armor to judge its thickness, looking for weak points where his tools might gain entry. He's not thinking about the warrior inside. To him, it's just a really well-built machine that needs to be opened up. This collision of perspectives, the reverent Space Marine view of Dreadnoughts as honored heroes versus the orc view of them as particularly good loot, sets the stage for everything that follows. The orcs don't know they're about to wake something ancient and terrible. They don't understand that they're defiling a tomb that has remained sealed for longer than their entire recorded history. They just see a big metal box full of valuable parts, and they want in. Lost to time. How an ancient Dreadnought gets forgotten. For a Dreadnought to sleep undisturbed for 6,000 years requires a specific and tragic set of circumstances. These are not lightly forgotten warriors. Chapters treat their Dreadnoughts with immense reverence, maintaining them with religious devotion, only awakening them for the most crucial battles. For one to be left behind, lost or abandoned, something catastrophic must have occurred. Let's consider the various scenarios that could lead to such a situation. Each possibility tells its own story of disaster. Each reveals something about the brutal nature of the 41st millennium and the countless ways that even the most sacred duties can fall by the wayside when survival is at stake. The most likely scenario involves the fall of a fortress monastery. Space Marine fortress monasteries are massive structures, often built into the sides of mountains or deep beneath planetary surfaces. They contain everything a chapter needs to function. Armories filled with weapons and armor, gene seed vaults where the chapter's genetic legacy is preserved, libraries containing thousands of years of records and tactical data, and deep within, the sacred vaults where Dreadnoughts sleep between battles. Now imagine this fortress coming under overwhelming attack. Perhaps a massive orc wag descends on the chapter's homeworld, billions of greenskins swarming over the defenses. Or a chaos warband, led by a rival chapter that fell to darkness millennia ago, seeks to destroy everything the loyalists hold dear. Maybe a Tyrannid hive fleet arrives, and the sheer biomass of the assault makes defense impossible. Whatever the threat, it's so severe that the chapter is forced to evacuate their home. In such circumstances, priorities must be made with brutal clarity. The gene seed must be saved. It's the chapter's future, irreplaceable. The armory's most valuable weapons, the ancient relics that cannot be allowed to fall into enemy hands, these too must be evacuated. The chapter's records, its history, as much as can be carried must be preserved. But there's only so much space on the evacuation ships, only so much time before the enemy breaches the final defenses. And somewhere in the deepest vaults, far from the main evacuation routes, a Dreadnought sleeps. Perhaps his wake-up schedule indicated he wasn't due to be roused for another century. Maybe the tech marines who tended him were killed in the initial assault, and no one else knew his exact location. Or he was simply too deep, too difficult to reach in the chaos of evacuation. The decision is made, cruel and pragmatic. The living must be saved. The sleeper will have to be left behind. The chapter escapes, leaving their homeworld to the enemy. The fortress monastery falls, buried under rubble or consumed by flames, or simply abandoned to the elements. Centuries pass. The chapter establishes a new home, trains new recruits, fights new wars. The old world becomes a dead world, a cautionary tale told to initiates. And deep beneath the ruins, the Dreadnought sleeps on, his stasis systems designed to function for millennia without maintenance. His chapter believes him lost or destroyed. He doesn't even know they've gone. Another possibility involves space hulks, those vast conglomerations of wrecked ships that drift through the warp. Space hulks are created when multiple vessels collide in the warp, their wreckage fusing together into massive, twisted structures that can contain dozens or even hundreds of individual ships. They emerge from the warp randomly, often in the middle of inhabited systems, and are both dangerous and valuable in equal measure. Imagine a Space Marine strike cruiser caught in a warp storm. The vessel's Geller field flickers, and demons breach the hull, slaughtering the crew. In the desperate battle that follows, one of the ship's dreadnoughts is activated from his stasis vault to help repel the invaders. He fights valiantly, crushing demons with his power fist, burning them with his heavy flamer. But the ship is doomed. The warp storm intensifies, and the cruiser is torn apart, scattered across the Imperium. Decades later, the pieces of that ship, along with wreckage from a dozen other vessels, coalesce into a space hulk. The Dreadnought, still sealed in his sarcophagus, his systems automatically entering emergency stasis when the ship's power failed, is now trapped within a twisted maze of corridors and chambers. The space hulk drifts through the warp for millennia, occasionally emerging into real space before being dragged back into the Imperium. With each emergence, more ships crash into it, more wreckage is added to the mass. The Dreadnought sleeps through it all. His sarcophagus, designed to be nearly indestructible, protects him from the worst of the warp's influence. His stasis systems, powered by batteries designed to last centuries, keep him preserved. He's utterly alone in the darkness, entombed within a tomb within a tomb, drifting through hell itself. And he doesn't wake, because his activation protocols require external input, a signal that will never come from the dead ship around him. A third scenario involves battlefield casualties under extraordinary circumstances. Picture a campaign on a death world, fighting against overwhelming Xenos forces. The chapter commits everything to the battle, including their most ancient dreadnoughts. In the final desperate assault, one of these venerable warriors takes catastrophic damage. His weapons systems are destroyed, his motive systems crippled. He's unable to move or fight, a sitting duck on the battlefield. But the enemy is pressing hard, and there's no time for recovery. The chapter's tech marines promise to return for the fallen dreadnought once the battle is won. They seal his sarcophagus in emergency hibernation mode, protecting the warrior within even as his dreadnought shell is left behind. The battle continues, raging for days or weeks. And then something unexpected happens. Perhaps the planet's unstable geology triggers a massive earthquake, burying the dreadnought under tons of rock. Or a sudden weather event, one of those planet-killing storms that death worlds are known for, scours the battlefield clean and hides the fallen warrior beneath layers of sediment. Maybe the chapter wins the battle, but takes such severe casualties that, in the chaos of withdrawal, the coordinates of the fallen dreadnought are lost. The tech marine who knew his exact location is killed in a subsequent engagement, and the information dies with him. The chapter searches, of course. They send recovery teams, they scan from orbit, they interrogate any survivors who might remember. But the planet is vast, the conditions are harsh, and the dreadnought's energy signature is masked by emergency protocols designed to prevent enemy detection. Eventually, regretfully, the search is called off. The warrior is declared lost with honor, his name added to the rolls of the fallen. And beneath the ground, he sleeps on, waiting for a rescue that will never come. There's also the possibility of administrative failure on a scale that seems impossible, but is all too common in the Imperium. Remember, this is a civilization that spans 1,000,000 worlds, that has been fighting for its survival for 10,000 years, that loses entire planets to bureaucratic oversight. Records get lost, data gets corrupted, important information is filed away and forgotten. Imagine a dreadnought being transferred between chapter holdings. Perhaps his home fortress monastery is undergoing extensive renovations, and the sleeping warriors are being temporarily relocated to a subsidiary facility. The dreadnought is loaded onto a transport, properly secured, all the paperwork filed according to protocol. But somewhere in transit, something goes wrong. Maybe the transport is attacked by pirates, and while the crew successfully repels the attack, some of the cargo manifests are destroyed. Or the ship suffers a warp drive malfunction and arrives at its destination several decades late, by which time the facility has been abandoned due to Xenos incursion. Perhaps simple human error is to blame, the dreadnought being offloaded at the wrong location, placed in storage pending proper assignment, and then simply forgotten as more urgent matters demand attention. In any case, the result is the same. The dreadnought sits in some dark corner of some forgotten facility, his stasis pod functioning perfectly, preserving him indefinitely. The chapter that owned him thinks he's somewhere else. The people responsible for the facility don't know he's there or don't understand what he is. Time passes, centuries become millennia, and still he sleeps, waiting for orders that were lost 6,000 years ago. The state of a dreadnought after 6,000 years of unattended stasis would be fascinating from a technical standpoint. These machines are built to last, designed by artificers who understood that their work would need to function for centuries or even millennia. The stasis systems are redundant, with backup power supplies and fail-safe mechanisms. The life support that keeps the pilot alive is similarly robust, maintaining the amniotic fluid, regulating temperature, filtering out any contaminants. But nothing lasts forever, not in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. 6,000 years is a long time, even for systems designed with such care. Some degradation is inevitable. The armor plating might be corroded, eaten away by time and whatever environmental conditions the dreadnought has been exposed to. The sacred seals and purity scrolls that cover its hull have likely crumbled to dust. The paint has faded or flaked away entirely, leaving the bare metal exposed. Inside, the situation might be even more precarious. Lubricants have thickened or evaporated. Seals have become brittle. Electronic components have degraded. The neural interface might still function, but perhaps with glitches or errors that will make the awakening process even more traumatic than usual. The weapon systems might be seized up, requiring significant effort to bring online. The motive systems could be stiff, making movement difficult and painful. And the warrior inside? 6,000 years of dreamless sleep, of complete sensory deprivation, of existence reduced to the absolute minimum necessary to maintain consciousness. It's impossible to say what that does to a mind, even a space marine mind, conditioned to endure the unendurable. Some dreadnoughts report that their long sleeps feel instantaneous. One moment they're being placed in stasis, the next they're waking to battle. Others describe an awareness of time passing, a sense of floating in darkness for what feels like eternity. Our 6,000-year sleeper might wake clear-headed and ready for battle, or he might wake confused, damaged, his mind fractured by the impossible span of his slumber. So here's our scenario, as it stands. Somewhere in the galaxy, in a location that could be almost anywhere, an ancient dreadnought sleeps. He's been sleeping for 6,000 years, forgotten by his chapter, lost to the records of the Imperium. His systems still function, barely, maintained by engineering that predates the Horus heresy itself. He's alone in the darkness, dreaming whatever dreams are possible for a mind trapped in a machine. And somewhere else in the galaxy, a warband of orcs is on the move. They're looting, scavenging, searching for anything valuable to fuel their wag. They don't know about the sleeping dreadnought, don't know what they're about to find. But their path and his are about to converge. And when they do, the violence that erupts will be a thing of terrible beauty. The discovery, when green meets grey orcs, find things through a combination of systematic scavenging and pure dumb luck, weighted heavily toward the latter. In this case, let's imagine the warband has descended on a dead world, one of those countless planets scattered across the galaxy that once held life, but now stands empty and lifeless. Maybe it was an imperial world that fell to invasion centuries ago. Perhaps it was abandoned when its star began to die, the population evacuated and the infrastructure left to decay. The specific reason doesn't matter. What matters is that it's full of ruins, and ruins mean loot. The orcs arrive in a hodgepodge fleet of ramshackle vessels, cruisers cobbled together from a dozen different ship designs, smaller attack craft bristling with guns that look like they should tear the ships apart from recoil alone, and maybe a looted Imperial frigate covered in crude orc modifications. They make planetfall with their usual subtlety, which is to say none at all. Landing craft slam into the ground hard enough to create craters. Orcs pour out, already arguing about which direction to search first. The warband splits up, as orcs tend to do. Small groups of boys head off in different directions, each convinced they'll find the best loot. Knobs lead their squads deeper into the ruins, looking for anything that might be valuable or dangerous, or, ideally, both. And somewhere in this chaos, a particularly ambitious big mech named Zagfang decides to investigate a large, half-collapsed structure that scanners indicate has significant metal deposits underground. Zagfang is everything you'd expect from a big mech. He's larger than the average orc, with arms like tree trunks and a head that seems too small for his massive body. He's covered in various bits of technology, both functional and decorative. Bionic eyes that give him the ability to see in multiple spectrums. A mechanical arm that ends in a power claw on one side, and a sophisticated suite of tools on the other. Various cables and wires run across his body, connecting devices whose purpose is known only to him. He wears a helmet that's part protective gear, part communications array, and part fashion statement, covered in spikes and painted bright red because red is lucky. He's brought a crew with him, a dozen looters carrying their ramshackle def guns, always eager for salvage. A handful of Gretchen to do the actual digging and carry the heavy stuff, and another mech boy, a younger orc named Scrubnut, who serves as Zagfang's apprentice. Together, they approach the ruins, which appear to be the remains of what was once a significant structure. Perhaps it was a fortress monastery, now so thoroughly destroyed that its original purpose is barely recognizable. Maybe it was a shrine or a storage facility. The orcs don't know and don't particularly care. They start digging. Gretchen are sent into the smaller openings, squeaking nervously as they crawl through collapsed corridors and unstable tunnels. Orks with crude excavation equipment start tearing through walls and floors, looking for the metal their scanners detected. The work is loud, chaotic, and thoroughly haphazard. Orks don't excavate carefully. They excavate by hitting things with bigger things until they break. Hours pass. The Orks find some minor treasures. Old weapons corroded beyond use but potentially salvageable. Chunks of metal that can be melted down and repurposed. A few bits of machinery that Zagfang examines with interest before tossing to his Gretchen to carry. It's decent loot, but nothing spectacular. The big mech is starting to think about moving on to a different site when one of the Gretchen comes scrambling back, chittering excitedly. The little creature leads them deeper into the ruins, down a ramp that descends into what was once an underground chamber. The Orks have to widen the entrance, tearing away rubble with their power claws and crude excavation tools. The air that flows out when they finally break through is stale, tasting of metal and old machinery. Zagfang's bionic eyes adjust to the darkness as he leads the way down. The chamber they enter is large, much larger than the ruins above would suggest. It was clearly designed for some important purpose. The walls, where they're visible under layers of dust and debris, bear carved icons that the Orks don't recognize but instinctively dislike. Imperial eagles, skulls, sacred seals. This was a holy place once, before the darkness claimed it. And there, in the center of the chamber, sits the Dreadnought. 6,000 years of dust coat its surface, making it appear almost like a natural formation at first glance. But as Zagfang approaches, shining lights across its surface, the truth becomes clear. This is a machine, a war machine, and it's massive. Even seated in its maintenance cradle, it towers over the Orks. The basic shape is unmistakable. The blocky torso, the weapon mounts on each arm, the armored sarcophagus at the center. This is Space Marine technology, and even Orks, who've never seen a Dreadnought before, can recognize it as something important. Zagfang circles the dormant machine slowly, taking it all in. His bionic eyes scan it in multiple spectrums, analyzing what they can. The armor is thick, several inches of blessed ceramite and adamantium alloy. One arm ends in what looks like a massive power fist, though it's difficult to tell under all the dust. The other seems to mount some kind of heavy weapon, possibly an assault cannon or lascannon. The sarcophagus at the machine's heart is covered in ornate decorations, sacred seals, and what might once have been purity scrolls, now crumbled to almost nothing. The looters crowd around, murmuring to each other in rough Orkish.
"What is it, boss?" one of them asks. "Some kind of robot?"
"Nah, it ain't no robot," Zagfang replies, running his mechanical hand across the Dreadnought's surface. It's one of them Yumi walkers. Seen pictures in a book I looted once. Dread something. Big and tough and full of good bits. The Ork's excitement is palpable now. This isn't just good loot, this is amazing loot. The amount of technology packed into this single machine could equip a whole mob with upgraded weapons and armor. The mech boys could study it for months, learning new techniques and incorporating Imperial tech into their own designs. This is the kind of find that legends are made of. But there's a problem, and Zagfang sees it immediately. The Dreadnought is completely sealed. There are no obvious access panels, no convenient hatches. The whole thing is designed to be a fortress, protecting whatever's inside from external threats. Getting into it is going to require either tremendous force or tremendous cleverness, preferably both. "Right, Den," Zagfang announces, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We's gonna crack this thing open and see what's inside. Scrubnut, go get the big tools from the ship. Gretchen, start clearing the space around it. Rest of you boys, check if there's anything else down here worth taking." The Orks set to work with their characteristic enthusiasm. The Gretchens scurry around the Dreadnought, sweeping away dust and debris, revealing more of its surface. The looters fan out through the chamber, searching for anything else of value. Scrubnut heads back up to the surface to retrieve the heavy equipment they'll need. Zagfang, meanwhile, continues his examination. He's trying to determine the best point of attack. The armor is thickest around the central sarcophagus, protecting what he assumes is the important stuff inside. The joints where the arms connect to the torso might be weaker, but they're also more difficult to access. The weapon mounts themselves could potentially be removed, giving access to some of the internal systems, but he'd prefer to keep those intact if possible, because Ork weapons are always better with more dakka. As he's pondering this, something catches his eye. On the Dreadnought's chest, beneath a thick layer of grime, there's what looks like a small panel. It's barely visible, designed to be inconspicuous, but Zagfang's mechanical eye picks up the seam in the armor. He brushes away more dust, revealing what appears to be an access port of some kind. It's locked, naturally, but locks are something Orks understand. You either find the key, or you become the key by hitting it really hard. Zagfang pulls a crude multi-tool from his belt and starts working on the panel. The lock is sophisticated, far beyond anything Orks normally encounter, but he's patient in his own way. He jams probes into the mechanism, twisting and prying, occasionally hitting it with the flat of his power claw to encourage cooperation. After several minutes of this, something inside clicks. The panel slides open, revealing a series of input ports and what might be diagnostic displays, all dark and inactive. Zagfang stares at it, his mind working. This is beyond even his considerable expertise with Imperial technology. The systems are ancient, more sophisticated than anything he's encountered before. But there are wires and circuits, things he can work with. If he can just figure out which ones to connect. He's so focused on this that he doesn't notice the change at first. It's subtle, a slight warming of the Dreadnought's surface, a barely audible hum from deep within its systems. The stasis field that has kept it dormant for 6,000 years is designed with multiple failsafes and redundancies. One of those failsafes involves automatic awakening if the access panel is opened by unauthorized personnel. Zagfang has just triggered that protocol. Deep within the sarcophagus, systems begin to activate. Power flows to long-dormant circuits. The amniotic fluid that has cradled the warrior's remains for millennia begins to circulate, carrying oxygen and nutrients to tissues that have been in a state of near death. The neural interface starts to warm up, preparing to reconnect consciousness to mechanical body. Diagnostics run automatically, checking the condition of the systems, flagging errors and damage from 6,000 years of sleep. And in the darkness of his long slumber, the warrior begins to wake. Hammering on the tomb, Ork investigation and looting attempts. By the time Scrubnut returns with the heavy equipment, Zagfang has made a concerning discovery. The Dreadnought is not, as he initially assumed, completely dead. His probes into the access panel have detected power flowing through the machine's systems. Faint, but definitely present. Something inside this ancient walker is still alive, still functioning. This should probably worry him, but Zagfang is an Ork, and worry isn't really part of their emotional range. Instead, he's excited. A working Dreadnought is worth far more than a dead one. The equipment Scrubnut brings down includes some of the mech's best tools. Plasma cutters powered by overcharged batteries. Massive power drills that can bore through tank armor. A collection of crowbars, sledgehammers, and other implements whose purpose is simply to hit things really, really hard. And the mech's pride and joy, a device they call the Big Zapper, which is essentially a massive arc welder capable of generating enough heat to cut through almost anything, or weld it, or occasionally explode spectacularly. It's a multi-purpose tool. Zagfang organizes his crew into work parties. Some Orks will try to remove the weapon systems, carefully if possible, but forcefully if necessary. Others will attack the joints and seams in the armor, looking for weak points where they can pry their way in. A team of Gretchen, supervised by Scrubnut, will set up the Big Zapper and prepare to cut into the main hull once they've identified the best point of attack. And Zagfang himself will continue working on the access panel, trying to figure out what these ancient systems do and how to make them do what he wants. The work begins with the kind of organized chaos that only Orks can manage. The looters start on the assault cannon, mounted on the Dreadnought's right arm, trying to unbolt it from its housing. They quickly discover that Imperial engineering, especially Imperial engineering from 6,000 years ago, does not yield easily. The bolts are fused in place, corroded by time until they're essentially welded to the surrounding structure. The looters resort to cutting torches, trying to burn through the mounts while being careful not to damage the weapon itself too badly. On the other side, Orks with power drills are attacking the shoulder joint, trying to bore through to the internal mechanisms. The drills scream as they contact the adamantium plating, throwing sparks, but making minimal progress. Dreadnought armor is designed to withstand less cannon fire. A few Ork drills aren't going to trouble it much. After several minutes of futile drilling, the Orks switch tactics, bringing out the heavy hammers and simply trying to bash their way through. The banging and clanging echoes through the underground chamber. Gretchens scurry around, carrying tools and parts, occasionally getting kicked aside by Orks who need more room to work. Scrubnut supervises the setup of the big zapper, making sure it's positioned correctly and that the power cells are properly connected. The device hums ominously, arcs of electricity crackling between its contacts. Zagfang, meanwhile, has made a breakthrough of sorts. By connecting one of his diagnostic tools to the access panel and running power through random circuits, he's managed to activate some of the Dreadnought's external systems. Not the important ones, not the weapons or the motive systems, but ancillary functions, like the external speakers and some kind of status display. The display flickers to life, showing a wash of Gothic script that he can't read, but that's probably important. And then, to his surprise, a voice emerges from the Dreadnought's speakers. It's distorted, crackling with interference, and the strain of systems that haven't been used in 6 millennia. But it's definitely a voice. It's speaking in Gothic, which Zagfang doesn't understand perfectly, but he catches enough to get the general idea. The Dreadnought is running through some kind of activation sequence. Systems check protocols, diagnostic reports. It's waking up. "Boss!" one of the looters shouts over the noise. "This thing is getting warm!" It's true. The Dreadnought's surface temperature has been rising steadily. What was once cold metal is now warm to the touch and getting warmer. Heat from the awakening systems is radiating through the armor. The amniotic fluid inside the sarcophagus is being heated to body temperature. Power is flowing through long-dormant circuits, bringing the ancient war machine back to life. Zagfang makes a decision. They need to get this thing open now, before it fully wakes up and becomes dangerous. "Get the big zapper going!" he roars. "We's cutting in right now!" Scrubnut doesn't need to be told twice. He activates the big zapper, and a brilliant arc of electricity leaps from its contacts to the Dreadnought's chest armor. The metal begins to glow red, then orange, then white hot. The Orks cheer. This is what they wanted. This is progress. The plasma cutters join in, multiple beams of superheated energy focusing on the same spot, trying to burn through the blessed ceramite that has protected the sarcophagus for 60 centuries. What the Orks don't realize is that they've made a critical error. The Dreadnought's awakening protocols include defensive measures designed to activate if the machine detects it's under attack during the revival process. The heat from the cutting tools, the vibrations from the hammering on the joints, the unauthorized access to the command systems, all of these trigger defensive responses. Deep inside the sarcophagus, weapon systems begin to initialize. The assault cannon's ammunition feed rattles as the first shells are loaded into the chamber. Targeting systems come online, searching for threats. The Power Fist's energy field begins to cycle up, crackling with barely contained force. Hydraulics pressurize, preparing to move the massive limbs. The Dreadnought's machine spirit, that ineffable quality that Imperial technology is said to possess, recognizes that it's under attack and responds accordingly. Zagfang sees the danger a split second before it manifests. The Dreadnought's eye lenses, which have been dark and lifeless, suddenly flare with light. Targeting lasers lance out, painting red dots across the Orks' bodies. The assault cannon begins to spin, a low whine building to a roar. The Power Fist clenches, servos grinding as they overcome 6,000 years of inactivity. "Oh, Zog," Zagfang says, which is the last thing he gets out before all hell breaks loose. The assault cannon fires. It's not a controlled burst, not the precise fire that a fully awakened and combat-ready Dreadnought would unleash. It's a spasmodic release, the weapon firing wildly as its systems struggle to come online. Shells spray across the chamber, tearing through Gretchen and Orks alike. The looters, clustered around the Dreadnought's right arm, are cut down in seconds, their bodies literally torn apart by the explosive rounds. Orks scatter, diving for cover behind rubble and debris. The assault cannon continues firing, tracking randomly across the chamber as the Dreadnought's targeting systems fight through layers of corruption and damage. The big zapper takes a direct hit, its power cells rupturing in a spectacular explosion that kills Scrubnut and two other mech boys instantly. Zagfang throws himself behind a fallen pillar, his mind racing. This has gone bad very quickly. The Dreadnought is awake, or at least partially awake, and it's treating them as enemies, which, to be fair, they are. He needs to make a choice, try to retreat and save what's left of his crew, or press the attack and hope they can crack this thing open before it fully comes online. The decision is made for him when the Dreadnought starts to move. The legs, which have been locked in place for 6,000 years, grind into motion. Hydraulics hiss and servos whine. The massive war machine lurches forward, pulling free from its maintenance cradle. It's not smooth movement, not yet. The Dreadnought staggers like a drunk, its systems still calibrating, its warrior within still fighting through the fog of his long sleep. But it's moving, and that's enough to terrify even Orks. One of the knobs, a particularly large and brave Ork named Graka, charges at the Dreadnought with his power claw raised high. He gets within striking distance, his claw crackling with energy as it descends toward the Dreadnought's leg joint. The blow connects, the power field disrupting the metal, and for a moment it looks like the Ork might actually do some damage. Then the Dreadnought's power fist comes down, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. It catches Graka in mid-swing, the enormous mechanical hand closing around the Ork's body. Energy fields flare. Graka has just enough time to realize what's happening before the fist clenches. The sound is wet and final. When the fist opens again, what's left of Graka drops to the floor in pieces. The remaining Orks are in full retreat now, scrambling up the ramp toward the surface. Zagfang goes with them, all thoughts of looting forgotten in the face of this unexpected resistance. Behind them, the Dreadnought continues its awakening process, its systems slowly coming online, its warrior within beginning to process what's happening around him. Awakening to nightmare, the Dreadnought stirs. Inside the sarcophagus, consciousness returns slowly and painfully. The warrior, who has been known by many names over his long service, but whose current designation is Brother Ancient Maxim of the Stormlord's chapter, fights his way back to awareness through layers of confusion and disorientation that would break a lesser mind. The first thing he becomes aware of is sensation, or rather the lack of it. He cannot feel his body, cannot sense his limbs or extremities. This should terrify him, but it's not new. He's a Dreadnought, has been for how long? The memory is fuzzy, lost in the haze of stasis sleep, but he knows this numbness, this disconnect between mind and flesh. It's familiar, even if it's never comfortable. Sound returns next. His audio sensors are feeding him data, translating it into something his brain can process. He hears. What does he hear? Impacts on his hull, the whine of power tools, raised voices speaking in a language that triggers immediate recognition routines. Orcish. Xenos. Enemy. Visual input follows, his optical sensors slowly calibrating, focusing. The chamber he's in is dark, lit only by the Orcs' crude lamps and the glow from their cutting tools. He sees green-skinned figures clustered around him, sees them attacking his hull with various implements. The tactical part of his mind, still working despite the confusion, catalogues threats, multiple targets, close range, armed with cutting equipment and some crude weapons. Immediate danger assessment, moderate to high. But beneath the tactical analysis, another part of his mind is screaming questions. Where is he? When is he? How long has he been asleep? The last thing he remembers a battle, doesn't he? Or was that many battles ago? Time has no meaning in stasis. He could have been asleep for days or decades or centuries. The disorientation is profound. His systems continue to initialize, running through activation protocols that were old when his chapter was young. Weapons check. Assault cannon ammunition feed active. Shell count at 60% capacity after 6,000 years in storage. Power fist energy field generator responding, though power output is below optimal. Hydraulics functional but stiff, requiring calibration. Armor integrity at 82%, showing significant degradation but still serviceable. Reactor output stable at 70% of maximum. The neural interface completes its connection, and suddenly he can move. The sensation is overwhelming after so long in absolute stillness. He tries to stand, and his body responds, but the movement is clumsy, unpracticed. How long has it been since he last walked? The legs that are not legs, the arms that are not arms, all of it feels foreign and familiar at once. The defensive protocols activate automatically when they detect the damage being done to his hull by the Ork cutting tools. He doesn't consciously decide to fire, the systems make that decision. For him, identifying threats and engaging them without waiting for confirmation from the damaged organic component struggling to understand its situation. The assault cannon roars to life, shells tearing through the Xenos who have dared to violate this sacred machine. And with the violence, with the blood and the screaming and the familiar rhythm of combat, something in Maxim's mind clicks into place. This is what he knows. This is what he was built for. The confusion recedes, pushed aside by 60 centuries of conditioning and the simple, pure clarity of purpose. There are enemies here. They must be destroyed. Everything else can wait. He processes the tactical situation with the speed that only a mind directly linked to advanced computing systems can manage. The chamber is underground, a vault of some kind, though he doesn't recognize it. The Orks are fleeing, retreating up a ramp toward what he assumes is the surface. Standard tactics would be to pursue, to press the attack while the enemy is in disarray, but his systems are still coming online, still fighting through layers of degradation and damage. Moving is difficult. Targeting is imprecise. He's not at full combat effectiveness, not yet. So instead, he focuses on gathering information. His sensors sweep the chamber, cataloging everything they detect. The walls bear markings that he recognizes, Stormlord's iconography, though the specific heraldry is from a period he doesn't immediately recall. This was once a chapter facility, that much is clear. But the state of decay suggests it's been abandoned for a very long time. The Orks have retreated to the top of the ramp, where they've taken cover and are shouting at each other in their crude language. Maxim's linguistic subroutines translate what they can. The big one, the mech boy based on his equipment and body language, is trying to organize a counterattack. The others are nervous, uncertain. Good. Fear is a weapon, even against creatures as fearless as Orks. Maxim takes a step forward, testing his stability. The movement is smoother this time, his systems adapting to the demands being placed on them. The ground trembles under his weight as he advances toward the ramp. The Orks see him coming and open fire, a ragged volley of shots from their crude weapons. Bullets and energy beams splash against his armor, doing no damage, but confirming what he already knew. They're not running anymore. They're fighting. This is good. This is right. This is what he exists for. His assault cannon spins up again, and this time the firing is controlled, precise. He walks the burst across the Ork positions, forcing them to take cover. One Ork, slower than the rest, is caught in the open and literally disintegrates under the barrage. The others huddle behind whatever protection they can find, returning fire when they can, but mostly just trying to survive. Maxim continues his advance, his tactical subroutines already planning the next several moves. He needs to get to the surface to understand his situation better. But he also needs to eliminate these Xenos before they can summon reinforcements. The balance between these objectives shifts with each second, each new piece of data his sensors gather. As he reaches the base of the ramp, a larger orc, one of their warrior leaders by the size of him, charges down at him with a power claw raised high. It's a brave move, suicidal but brave. Maxim respects that, in the abstract way that warriors can respect their enemy's courage, even as they kill them. He catches the orc in his power fist, the energy field disrupting flesh and bone as easily as it would disrupt metal. The orc dies quickly, which is more mercy than he would have shown if Maxim had more time. But something about the encounter triggers a cascade of memories. He's fought orcs before, many times. They're a common enemy, found on countless worlds. He remembers. Armageddon? No, that's not right. Or is it? The memory is fragmented, mixed with other battles, other wars. He remembers crushing an orc war boss in these very fists. But when? Where? The details scatter when he tries to grasp them. The confusion is troubling, but not debilitating. He's learned to live with the degradation of memory that comes with being a dreadnought. The important things remain: his loyalty to the Emperor, his duty to the chapter, his purpose as a weapon in humanity's defense. The rest is just noise, data to be filed away or discarded as necessary. The orcs at the top of the ramp have fallen back, retreating to the surface. Maxim could pursue, but caution holds him back. He doesn't know what's waiting up there. Could be more orcs, could be something worse. Better to secure his position here, continue running diagnostics, get his systems fully online before committing to a major engagement. He spends several minutes doing exactly that, standing in the chamber where he apparently slept for how long? The chronometer in his systems has experienced significant drift, but based on the degradation of his components and the layer of dust that coated him, it's been a very long time, decades at minimum, possibly much longer. The implications of this are staggering, but Maxim files them away for later consideration. Right now, what matters is that he's awake, he's functional, and there are enemies nearby that need to be destroyed. Everything else is secondary. His systems finish their initialization sequences. Weapons, fully online. Motive systems, operational at 87%. Sensors, functional with minor degradation in thermal imaging. Communications, attempting to establish contact with chapter assets. The last one produces only static, which is concerning but not unexpected if he's been abandoned for as long as the evidence suggests. Maxim begins to climb the ramp, his massive form barely fitting in the passage. The orcs have collapsed part of the tunnel behind them, probably hoping to trap him or slow him. Down. It's ineffective. His power fist tears through the debris easily, clearing a path to the surface. When he finally emerges into daylight, the sight that greets him confirms his worst fears. He's on a dead world, or at least a dying one. The landscape is blasted and barren, with only the ruins of what might once have been a magnificent structure. The sky is wrong, not the familiar blue of Chagoris where the Stormlords are based, but a sickly grey-green. The air, filtered through his senses, tastes of decay and abandonment. And there, arrayed before him in a loose semicircle, are the orcs. There are more of them than he initially thought, at least 50 or 60 visible, with probably more lurking in the ruins. They're not attacking yet, but they're not running either. They're watching him, assessing him, preparing for the next phase of this battle. The mech boy who led the initial looting attempt is conferring with a massive orc in heavy armor, probably the warband's leader. They're pointing at him, arguing about something in their guttural language. Maxim doesn't need perfect translation to understand the gist. They're trying to decide whether to fight or flee, whether this ancient Imperial war machine is a threat they can handle or one they should avoid. Maxim makes the decision for them. His assault cannon speaks again, shells tearing through the closest group of orcs. The battle is joined, properly this time, and the ancient warrior settles into the familiar rhythms of war. This is what he was made for. This is what he exists to do. And as his weapons roar and orc blood stains the dead earth, Brother Ancient Maxim allows himself a moment of grim satisfaction. He may not know where he is, or when he is, or how he got here, but he knows what he is, and that's enough. He is a weapon of the Emperor's vengeance. He is death incarnate. He is a dreadnought of the Stormlords, and these Xenos will learn to fear him. The storm breaks. Battle on dead ground. The initial exchange of fire is brief and brutal. Maxim's assault cannon cuts through the first rank of orcs like a scythe through wheat, the explosive shells detonating inside green flesh and hurling bodies through the air. But the orcs are not so easily cowed. For every one that falls, 2 more pour out of the ruins, drawn by the sound of battle like moths to a flame. This is what orcs live for, and while they might have been uncertain about attacking a dormant dreadnought, a fighting one is exactly the kind of challenge they crave. The Orc war boss, a massive brute named Grok Ironteeth, bellows orders in Orcish. His boys respond immediately, spreading out in a loose formation that's surprisingly tactical for greenskins. They've fought Space Marines before, maybe even encountered dreadnoughts in battle. They know better than to cluster together where a single burst can kill them all. Instead, they move in small groups, using the rubble for cover, trying to get close enough to bring their choppers and power claws to bear. Maxim tracks them through his targeting sensors, prioritizing threats based on distance and firepower. A group of looters with heavy weapons gets the first sustained burst from his assault cannon. The shells find them behind their barricade, tearing through the crude cover and the orcs sheltering behind it. An orc with a rocket launcher manages to get a shot off before Maxim's weapons find him. The missile screams through the air and impacts against the dreadnought's shoulder armor, exploding with enough force to stagger the ancient machine, but not penetrate its blessed ceramite. The warboss charges, because of course he does. That's what orc warbosses do. Grok is a mountain of muscle and armor, wielding an enormous power claw that crackles with barely contained energy and a massive chopper that looks like it was cut from the hull of a tank. He's killed Space Marines before, probably dozens of them. He thinks a single dreadnought, even an ancient one, is just another enemy to be crushed. Maxim lets him come, tracking his approach while continuing to fire at the other orcs. Combat calculations run through his tactical subroutines. The warboss is fast, faster than something that size should be, but not faster than Maxim's targeting systems can track. Distance, 50 meters and closing. Time to contact, 4 seconds. Optimal engagement range for Power Fist, 3 meters. He waits. At 10 meters, the warboss launches himself into a charge, bellowing a war cry that echoes across the battlefield. At 5 meters, Maxim stops firing the assault cannon and brings his power fist up in a defensive position. At 3 meters, they collide. The impact sends shockwaves through both combatants. Grok's power claw strikes the dreadnought's chest armor, the energy field tearing through the outer layer of ceramite but failing to penetrate the adamantium beneath. Maxim's power fist comes down on the warboss's shoulder, and there's a horrible crunching sound as orc bone and metal both give way. Grok roars in pain and anger, slamming his chopper into the dreadnought's leg joint, actually managing to score the armor. They separate and circle each other, 2 titans of their respective races sizing each other up. The other orcs have stopped their advance, watching the duel between their leader and the ancient Imperial machine. This is the kind of fight orcs love to see. Single combat between worthy opponents. Some of them are even placing bets on the outcome. Grok attacks again, and this time he's more cautious. He feints with his chopper, drawing Maxim's defensive response, then strikes with his power claw at a different angle. It's a good tactic, one that speaks to the warboss's experience. But Maxim has been fighting for longer than this orc has been alive. His combat subroutines predict the feint and adjust, the power fist coming around to catch the claw in mid-strike. Metal screams against metal. Energy fields interact violently, throwing sparks and arcs of power in all directions. For a moment, the two forces are evenly matched, locked in a contest of pure strength. Then Maxim's superior power systems begin to win out, pushing the warboss's claw back, forcing the orc to retreat or risk having his arm torn off. Grok chooses to retreat, but it's a tactical withdrawal, not a rout. He dances back, surprisingly agile for his size, putting distance between himself and the Dreadnought. Then he does something unexpected. He looks at Zagfang, the big mech who's been watching from a safe distance, and roars, "Bring the big guns!" The mech doesn't need to be told twice. He starts shouting orders, and suddenly the orcs' behavior changes. They're not just shooting randomly anymore. They're setting up heavy weapons, positioning them for optimal fields of fire. A team of Gretchen drags a massive gun out from behind a collapsed wall, something that looks like it was looted from an Imperial guard emplacement and then improved, with typical orc modifications. It's pointed at Maxim, and it's big enough to potentially do serious damage. Maxim recognizes the danger and acts accordingly. His assault cannon swings toward the heavy weapon, but before he can fire, 3 of the looters step into his line of sight, deliberately blocking his shot. They know they're going to die, but they're buying time for their compatriots to set up the big gun. It's a level of tactical sacrifice that Maxim didn't expect from orcs, and it costs him precious seconds. Those seconds are enough. The heavy gun fires, a massive shell that streaks across the battlefield and slams into Maxim's torso with enough force to actually rock him backward. The armor holds, but barely. Alarms blare in his cockpit, warning of structural stress and potential breach. He needs to take out that gun before it can fire again. But Grok is charging again, using the distraction of the heavy weapon to close distance. And this time, he's brought friends, a mob of knobs who've decided to join their boss in the assault. Maxim finds himself surrounded, forced to split his attention between the immediate melee threat and the distant artillery threat. His tactical subroutines run through options, calculating probabilities, and arrive at a grim conclusion. He cannot win this fight through firepower alone. He's going to have to get his hands dirty. The Dreadnought surges forward, not away from the orc mob, but into it. His power fist lashes out, catching one of the knobs and crushing him instantly. His other arm, the one mounting the assault cannon, swings like a club, battering orcs aside with the sheer mass of the weapon. It's brutal, inelegant combat, but it's effective. The orcs are tough, far tougher than normal humans, but they're not tougher than a several-ton war machine intent on pulping them. Grok comes at him from the side, chopper raised high. The blade comes down on Maxim's shoulder joint, right where the armor is weakest, and this time it penetrates. Sparks fly as the crude but powerful weapon cuts through cables and hydraulic lines. Maxim feels the connection to his right arm weaken, the assault cannon becoming harder to control. In response, he pivots his entire body, using his mass as a weapon. The movement catches Grok off guard, and the power fist comes around in a wide arc that the warboss can't dodge. It catches him in the chest, the energy field tearing through his armor and the flesh beneath. Grok goes down hard, blood pouring from a wound that would kill a lesser being instantly. But orcs are not lesser beings when it comes to durability. Grok is down, but he's not dead. He's trying to stand, trying to raise his weapons for another attack. And all around Maxim, more orcs are closing in, drawn by the smell of blood and the promise of a good fight. The heavy gun fires again, and this time the shell hits Maxim's leg. The impact is catastrophic. Armor plates buckle, hydraulics rupture, and the entire leg, assembly, shudders under the force of the impact. Maxim staggers, nearly falls, and has to compensate by shifting his weight to his good leg. Mobility is now severely compromised. He can still fight, but he can't maneuver effectively. And that's when Zagfang makes his move. The big mech has been watching, analyzing, looking for an opportunity. Now he sees it. While Maxim is focused on the melee and the heavy gun, Zagfang circles around to his flank. carrying what looks like a massive power drill, the kind used to bore through starship hulls. He revs it up, the sound cutting through the chaos of battle, and charges. Maxim sees him coming too late. The drill hits his damaged leg, right at the joint where the shell impact has weakened the armor. The rotating bit chews through ceramite and adamantium, burrowing deeper with every second. More alarms sound. More systems begin to fail. If the mech reaches the hydraulic assembly, the leg will be completely disabled. Maxim tries to turn, to bring his weapons to bear on this new threat, but movement is difficult with a damaged leg and orcs swarming around him. The best he can manage is a clumsy swipe with his assault cannon, which Zagfang ducks under with surprising agility. The drill bites deeper, and Maxim can feel his leg beginning to give way. This is bad. This is very bad. He's sustained damage that would require extensive repairs, damage that he can't fix on his own. His ammunition is running low, his power reserves are depleting faster than they should due to the compromised systems, and there are still dozens of orcs eager to tear him apart. The tactical situation is deteriorating rapidly, but Brother Ancient Maxim has faced impossible odds before. Somewhere in his fragmented memories, buried under 6,000 years of stasis and battle, he recalls fighting alongside his chapter against enemies that should have destroyed them utterly. He remembers last stands and desperate defenses and victories snatched from the jaws of defeat. He doesn't remember the details, can't recall the names or the places, but he remembers the feeling. The absolute refusal to yield, the determination to fight until the very end, the certainty that the Emperor protects those who stand firm. He activates his Vox speakers, his voice, mechanical and distorted, but carrying undeniable authority, booming across the battlefield. I am Maxim of the Stormlords. I have walked among the stars for 6,000 years. I have broken armies and shattered empires. You are Xenos filth, and you will not take this day. The orcs pause, just for a moment, shocked by the sudden declaration. And in that moment, Maxim makes his move. He brings his power fist down on his own leg, right where Zagfang's drill has compromised the armor. The energy field tears through the already weakened structure, completing what the mech started. The lower leg assembly separates from the rest of his body with a screech of tearing metal. And as it falls away, it takes Zagfang with it, the big mech still clinging to his drill, now trapped under several tons of falling Dreadnought components. Maxim topples, no longer able to maintain balance on one leg, but he controls his fall, turning it into an attack. His massive bulk crashes down on top of the knobs, who were trying to flank him, crushing them beneath his weight. The impact shakes the ground, sending a cloud of dust into the air. For a moment, there's silence. The orcs stare at the fallen Dreadnought, uncertain whether to celebrate or retreat. Then, Maxim's assault cannon roars to life again, firing from his prone position, cutting down orcs who thought he was finished. His power fist sweeps across the ground, grabbing orcs and hurling them aside like ragdolls. He can't walk anymore, but he can still fight. And fight he does, with the fury of a warrior who has given everything to the Emperor's service and will not yield even in his darkest hour. The orcs press in, thinking they can finish him off, but Maxim makes them pay for every inch of ground they gain, every moment they remain in his reach. The endless green, orc adaptations, and the growing wag. What follows is not a clean victory for either side, but rather a grinding, brutal stalemate that stretches hours into days. The initial assault on the fallen Dreadnought costs the orcs dearly. Maxim's weapons, even firing from a static position, cut down wave after wave of attackers. His power fist becomes a tool of terrible efficiency, crushing any orc who gets close enough. The area around him becomes a charnel ground, littered with bodies and scrap. But orcs are not so easily deterred. More than that, they're learning. Each attack wave comes with new tactics, new approaches. They start using the terrain better, approaching from multiple angles to divide Maxim's fire. They bring up more heavy weapons, positioning them in spots where the Dreadnought can't effectively return fire. They adapt, and in that adaptation, we see the terrible genius of the orc species at work. Zagfang survives his encounter with the falling Dreadnought leg, though he's badly injured. One of his arms is crushed, his mechanical augments sparking and failing. But his mind, that genetically encoded understanding of machinery, is still working perfectly. And now he has something he's wanted from the beginning: Dreadnought parts. The severed leg assembly is a treasure trove of advanced technology, hydraulics more sophisticated than anything orcs normally build, armor plating that can withstand incredible punishment, servo motors and actuators of a precision that mech boys dream about. Zagfang has his remaining arm and several Gretchen drag the leg away from the battlefield, back to a makeshift workshop he sets up in the ruins. Over the next several days, as the battle continues in fits and starts, Zagfang performs a kind of profane surgery on the Dreadnought's severed limb. He strips it down, analyzing every component, trying to understand how it works. Some things he can comprehend immediately. They're similar enough to orc technology that the principles are clear. Others baffle him, operating on principles that seem to violate physics as he understands it. But that's where the wah field comes in. The more Zagfang studies the technology, the more he believes he understands it, the more likely it is that his attempted copies will actually work. He starts building new weapons based on what he's learned, mounting them on crude frames and testing them against the Dreadnought. Some fail spectacularly, exploding or simply falling apart. But some work, and those that work are refined and improved and deployed against Maxim. The Dreadnought finds himself facing weapons that are clearly based on his own technology, crude copies of Imperial designs wielded by Xenos hands. It's a disturbing development, watching the enemy literally learning from his own body, using pieces of him to build new tools of war. But he adapts too, analyzing the orc weapons' weaknesses, finding ways to counter them. Meanwhile, word of the battle has spread through the orc communication network, such as it is. Other warbands in the area hear about the fighting, about the ancient Imperial war machine that refuses to die, about the loot that's available for those brave enough to take it. They converge on the dead world, drawn like iron filings to a magnet. The orc force grows from 50 to 100 to 500. More war bosses arrive, each wanting to prove themselves against this legendary enemy. More mech boys come, eager to study the technology and claim salvage rights. The camp around Maxim's position grows into a crude settlement, with workshops and fighting pits, and all the infrastructure of an orc warband. This is how the WAG grows. Not through organization or planning, but through the simple gravitational pull of violence and opportunity. What started as a scavenging mission has become a full-scale siege, and the psychic field generated by so many orcs in one place is growing stronger by the day. Grok Irantif, somehow still alive despite the terrible wound Maxim inflicted, becomes the de facto leader of the assembled forces. His survival against the Dreadnought has earned him respect and authority among his kind. He's recovering in a crude field hospital, tended by a pain boy, whose medical care consists mostly of stabbing him with various stimulants and replacing damaged organs with cybernetic replacements. But he's already planning the next assault, drawing diagrams in the dirt and arguing with the other war bosses about tactics. The orcs try everything. They attempt to bury Maxim under rubble, dropping a building on top of him. He digs himself out and continues fighting. They flood his position with Gretchen, trying to overwhelm him through sheer numbers. He crushes them by the dozens, his ammunition never quite running out because the orcs helpfully keep leaving fresh supplies within his reach as they die. They even try to negotiate, with one particularly clever mech boy suggesting they could work together, the Dreadnought joining the WAG as a kind of pet. Maxim's response to that suggestion is to put an assault cannon shell through the negotiator's chest. But he's wearing down. His ammunition, while constantly replenished, is not infinite. His power reserves are depleting. His systems are sustaining cumulative damage that he cannot repair. He calculates his odds of survival at less than 20% and dropping. If this continues, the orcs will eventually overwhelm him through sheer attrition. What he doesn't know, what he cannot know without working communication systems, is that his awakening has not gone completely unnoticed. When he first came online, his Dreadnought's automatic distress beacon activated, sending out a weak signal on long-dormant frequencies. That signal has been traveling through space for days now, growing fainter with distance, but still detectable by those who know what to listen for. And 6 days after the battle began, a Stormlord's Rapid Strike Force, investigating reports of Ork activity in the sector, picks up that beacon. The signal is old, degraded, barely recognizable, but it's definitely one of theirs, a Dreadnought distress call using encryption keys that haven't been current for 6,000 years. The Strike Force commander, Captain Tenebris, recognizes the significance immediately. They have found one of their lost ancestors, and he is calling for aid. Alone against the Horde, the Dreadnoughts struggle. The 6th day of the siege finds Brother Ancient Maxim in a state that borders on mechanical shutdown. His assault cannon has finally run dry, the last shell expelled in a burst that killed 3 Orks trying to plant explosives on his damaged torso. His power fist still functions, but the energy field flickers intermittently, weakened by power drain and damaged generators. His optical sensors are cracked and failing, giving him a fractured, distorted view of the battlefield. And still he fights. He has become a fixture of the battlefield, a monument to stubborn endurance. The Orks have built fortifications around him, crude walls and barriers that channel attackers into specific approach routes. They're treating this like a game now, a test of courage for young boys who want to prove themselves. Go poke the sleepy Yumi metal thing has become a rite of passage. But for Maxim, there's nothing game-like about this. Every movement sends warnings through his systems. Every blow he deflects causes further damage to already failing components. The neural interface that connects his organic remnants to the machine is degrading, making his responses slower, less precise. He's dying by degrees, and he knows it. In the brief moments between attacks, his mind wanders. The strict discipline that has kept him focused is eroding along with everything else. Memories surface, fragmented and confused. He remembers. What does he remember? A parade ground on Chagoris, the Stormlord's homeworld. Young initiates training under a harsh sun. He was one of them once, wasn't he? Or was he watching them? The memory slips away before he can grasp it. A battle against chaos forces, fighting in the corridors of a space hulk. The screaming of demons and the prayers of his battle brothers. Fire and blood and the certainty of righteous purpose. But when was that? Who was he then? The details refuse to resolve. A face, someone important. A friend, a superior. The features are blurred, faded by time and stasis. But he remembers the voice, calm and certain. Your watch is not yet ended, brother. Who said that? When? The confusion is worse than the damage, worse than the pain. Maxim has fought for thousands of years, has endured wounds and hardships that would break lesser warriors. But this erosion of self, this gradual dissolution of identity, terrifies him in a way that death never could. He's becoming less a person and more a weapon, losing the last fragments of what made him human. An Ork charges his position, and Maxim crushes it almost absently, his weapons moving on autopilot while his mind continues to drift. Is this what the end looks like? Not a glorious death in battle, but a slow fade into oblivion, consciousness eroding until nothing remains but the machine's basic functions. He remembers the words carved above the entrance to every Dreadnought vault. Even in death, I still serve. He served for so long. 6,000 years, if his calculations are correct. How much longer can he endure? How much longer should he endure? The thought is treasonous, and he forces it down immediately. He is a space marine, a stormlord, a weapon of the Emperor's vengeance. His wants, his suffering, his loneliness, these are irrelevant. He will fight until he cannot fight anymore, and then he will fight still, because that is what he was made for. That is all he has left. But oh, how he longs for it to end. Not in defeat, never in defeat, but an honorable death, a final rest. the peace that has been denied him for so long. He imagines the Emperor's presence, imagines laying down his burden at last, and hearing those words every warrior dreams of. "Well done, my son. Your watch is ended." An explosion rocks his position, pulling him back to the present. The Orks have brought up another heavy gun, bigger than the last one. The shell impacts against his chest armor, and this time, something gives way. He hears the screech of tearing metal, feels the sudden change in pressure within his sarcophagus. Breach. They've breached his armor. Alarms scream warnings that his organic component is being exposed to the outside atmosphere. His life support systems compensate, increasing the pressure in the fluid that surrounds his ruined body. But it's a temporary measure. If the breach worsens, if more shells find the weak point, he will die. Not a clean death, in battle, but a slow suffocation as his lungs fill with toxic air and his amniotic cocoon fails. He has perhaps hours left, maybe less. The tactical part of his mind, still functioning despite the damage, calculates possible responses. He could try to move, to find better cover, but without working legs, movement is impossible. He could attempt to seal the breach from inside, but without working manipulators and with damaged systems, the repair would be crude at best. Or he could simply accept the inevitable and make these last hours count, taking as many of the Xenos with him as possible before the end. He chooses the latter. If this is to be his last battle, his final service to the Emperor, then it will be a service worthy of remembrance. Maxim stops conserving his power. He stops rationing his movements. Every system, every weapon, every capability he still possesses, he throws into the fight with absolute commitment. His power fist becomes a whirlwind of destruction, crushing Orks 3 and 4 at a time. His damaged assault cannon, ammunition exhausted, becomes a club that batters the enemy into submission. He roars defiance through his external speakers, his mechanical voice cutting across the battlefield like a blade. "Stormlords! For the Emperor and Chogoris! For the Khan and his sons! I am Maxim, and I will not yield!" The Orks, sensing the change in their prey, press harder. This is the kind of fight they live for, an enemy driven to desperation, fighting with everything they have. They surge forward in a mass assault, caring nothing for casualties, intent only on being the ones to finally bring down this ancient warrior. And Maxim meets them with weapons ready and spirit unbowed. If this is his ending, he will make it an ending worthy of song, worthy of being carved into the rolls of honor that record the deeds of the Stormlord's greatest heroes. He will prove, in these final moments, that 6,000 years have not dulled his edge, that the poor warrior, who was entombed so long ago, still exists within this failing shell. The battlefield becomes a whirlwind of violence. Ork bodies pile up around the fallen Dreadnought. Maxim's systems are failing one by one, power fading, weapons degrading, sensors going dark. But still he fights, and the Orks, for all their numbers and ferocity, cannot seem to land the killing blow. And then, from the ash-grey sky above, comes the scream of drop pods cutting through atmosphere. The storm descends. Possible outcomes. The arrival of the Stormlord's strike force changes everything. 3 drop pods slam into the ground around Maxim's position with the force of orbital bombardment, crushing Orks beneath their mass and scattering others with the shockwave of their impact. The assault ramps blow open before the pods have fully settled, and Space Marines in the white and blue colors of the Stormlords charge out, bolters roaring. Captain Tenebris leads the assault, his power sword already slick with Ork blood before he's taken 3 steps from his pod. Behind him, 2 tactical squads and an assault squad establish a perimeter, cutting down the disorganized greenskins with practiced precision. The Orks, caught completely by surprise, fall back in confusion. Tenebris spots the fallen Dreadnought immediately, recognizes the ancient heraldry on its hull despite 6,000 years of weathering and damage. "Brother Ancient," he voxes on all frequencies. "This is Captain Tenebris of the Stormlord's 3rd Company. Hold position. Relief is here." Maxim's optical sensors, damaged and failing, takes several seconds to process what he's seeing. Space Marines, his brothers, though he doesn't recognize their armor marks or their faces. But the colors are right. The iconography is correct. Stormlords, his chapter, his family. For the first time in 6,000 years, Brother Ancient Maxim is not alone. What happens next depends on many factors: the strength of the Ork force, the resources available to the Stormlords, the extent of Maxim's damage, and perhaps most importantly, the will of both sides to continue the fight. Let us consider the possible outcomes of this scenario, each representing a different facet of the grim darkness that defines Warhammer 40,000. Outcome 1. Extraction and salvation. In this scenario, Captain Tenebris's strike force is strong enough to break the Ork siege and extract the ancient Dreadnought. The Space Marines establish a defensive perimeter, their superior firepower and coordination more than a match for the disorganized Greenskins. A tech marine from the strike force, Brother Kalis, reaches Maxim and performs emergency field repairs, sealing the breach in his sarcophagus and stabilizing his failing systems. The Orks, for all their numbers, cannot overcome Space Marine discipline and firepower. They take devastating casualties, trying to prevent the extraction, and eventually, even Grok Ironteeth recognizes the fight is lost. The war boss orders a retreat, pulling his forces back to regroup and lick their wounds. The Stormlords recover their ancient brother, loading him onto a Thunderhawk for transport to their battle barge in orbit. As the gunship lifts off, Maxim gets one last look at the battlefield where he made his stand, sees the scores of dead Orks and the scars his weapons left on the landscape. He has survived, against all odds and all reason. But survival comes with its own burdens. In the Apothecarion of the battle barge, tech marines and apothecaries assess the damage. The news is grim. His Dreadnought chassis has sustained structural damage that will require extensive repairs, work that will take months or even years. His organic component has deteriorated significantly after 6,000 years in stasis and a week of continuous combat. The neural interface is degrading. They can repair him, they can return him to service, but it will mean more time in stasis, more decades or centuries of dreamless sleep, before he's awakened again for the next war. The cycle continues. The curse renews itself. He has been saved, only to face the same fate he's endured for millennia. When they place him back in stasis, as the darkness takes him once more, Maxim wonders if salvation is really the right word for what's happened. He's alive, yes. He will fight again, yes. But the cost of that survival, the price of his continued service, weighs on him more heavily than any Ork weapon ever could. Still, there's a fragment of satisfaction in knowing he survived, that he proved the value of his chapter's faith in preserving him. The Stormlords have recovered one of their ancient heroes. His knowledge, his experience, his very existence as a link to their past, all of this has been preserved. In the cold calculus of the Imperium, this is a victory. Outcome 2, the final stand. In this darker possibility, the Stormlords arrive too late or in too small a force. Captain Tenebris and his men reach Maxim, but the Ork horde is simply too large, too well entrenched. Grok has had time to summon every warband in the sector, and thousands of greenskins now swarm the battlefield. The Space Marines make a fighting retreat, trying to extract the ancient Dreadnought, but the damage is too severe. Maxim cannot move, cannot be easily transported. To recover him would require specialized equipment, time they don't have, and a level of security they cannot establish. Tenebris faces a terrible choice: abandon the ancient hero to save his men, or make a stand and possibly lose everyone. Maxim makes the decision for him. Through crackling Vox channels, his voice distorted but unmistakable in its certainty, he orders the captain to withdraw. "Leave me, brother. I cannot be saved, but you can complete your mission. Tell the chapter. Tell them Brother Ancient Maxim died as he lived, serving the Emperor. Tell them my watch has ended at last." Tenebris argues, pleads, But Maxim is adamant. The captain is forced to recognize the tactical reality. With heavy hearts, the Stormlords withdraw, leaving their ancient brother to his fate. Maxim watches them go, feels a strange sense of peace settling over him. This is how it should end. Not in a dark vault, waiting for a call that might never come, but in battle, weapons hot and enemies falling before him. If he must die, let it be like this, fighting, defiant, unbroken. The Orks surge forward once the Space Marines have left, eager to finish off their wounded prey. Maxim meets them with everything he has left. His power fist crushes Ork after Ork. His damaged weapons fire until they literally fall apart from the strain. His sarcophagus, its seals failing, begins to fill with outside air that burns his exposed tissues. But he ignores the pain and keeps fighting. In the end, it's Zagfang who delivers the killing blow. The big mech, recovered enough to join the battle personally, approaches from Maxim's blind side with a massive power drill. He drives it into the breach in the sarcophagus, through the failing armor, into the amniotic fluid and the organic component it protects. Brother Ancient Maxim dies as the drill punches through his brain, ending 6,000 years of service in an instant. His last thought is not of regret or fear, but of relief. The watch has ended. The burden is lifted. He can rest at last. The Orks celebrate their victory, cheering and bellowing and firing their weapons into the air. Zagfang claims the Dreadnought's shell as his prize, already planning how to loot its remaining systems. The dead world falls silent once more, littered with bodies and wreckage. Later, when the Stormlords return in force to cleanse the world of Orks, they find Maxim's sarcophagus, empty and desecrated, but still bearing the heraldry of their chapter. They recover it with all ceremony, bringing it home to Chogoris, where it's placed in the halls of remembrance. Brother Ancient Maxim is honored as a hero, his name added to the rolls of the fallen, his service remembered in the songs of the chapter. It's not the ending he would have chosen, perhaps, but it's an ending worthy of a space marine, and in the grim darkness of the far future, that's the most any warrior can hope for. Outcome 3. The lonely victory. There's a third possibility, darker than either of the others. The Stormlords don't come. The distress beacon was too weak, too degraded by time. Or perhaps they received it but determined the cost of a rescue mission was too high. Or they came but couldn't find him. The dead world too vast, their time too limited. Maxim fights on alone, killing Orks day after day, week after week. His ammunition runs dry permanently. His power systems fail. His weapons become bludgeons, then break entirely. Eventually, he's reduced to using his sheer mass as a weapon, crushing Orks beneath his weight when they get close enough. But slowly, over time, the Orks lose interest. They've taken heavy casualties trying to crack this stubborn nut, and there are easier fights elsewhere in the galaxy. Grok, never fully recovering from his wounds, is eventually challenged and killed by a rival. The new war boss decides this dead world offers nothing worth the effort, and he leads the WAG elsewhere. The Orks leave. Not all of them. A few stragglers remain, scavengers picking over the battlefield, but the main force withdraws, and Maxim is left alone once more, damaged beyond any hope of self-repair, unable to move or fight or do anything but exist. Days turn to weeks, weeks to months. His power reserves, sustained by emergency solar collectors and the Dreadnought's robust energy systems, keep him technically alive. But he's trapped in a shell he cannot escape, on a world no one will ever visit, surrounded by the dead and dying. This is perhaps the cruelest fate of all. Not death in battle, not rescue and renewed service, but abandonment. An eternity of consciousness with nothing to do, no purpose to fulfill, no battles to fight. Just existence, stretching on and on and on, until his systems finally fail, or the star goes nova, or the world itself crumbles to dust. In this outcome, Brother Ancient Maxim becomes a legend, a ghost story told among the orcs who survived fighting him. Da undying Yumi metal thing what wouldn't die no matter how hard we stomped it. Some claim he's still there, on that dead world, waiting for someone to make the mistake of disturbing him. And in a way, they're right. Maxim is still there, will always be there, a monument to duty taken to its ultimate, terrible extreme. Even in death, he still serves, though there's no one left to witness his service. What it all means. The broader implications. Regardless of which outcome occurs, this scenario tells us something profound about the nature of Warhammer 40,000 and the factions that inhabit its universe. It's a story that could only happen in this setting, where ancient heroes sleep in tombs of metal and xenos, savages gleefully desecrate sacred relics. Let's examine what this encounter reveals about both sides and about the universe itself. For the Dreadnought, for Brother Ancient Maxim, or whatever other warrior fills his role, this scenario is the ultimate test of the promise made to every space marine who's interred in these walking tombs. They're told it's an honor, the greatest service they can render to the Emperor and their chapter. They're promised that their sacrifice will be remembered, that they will continue to serve, that they will be awakened only for the most crucial battles. But 6,000 years in the dark puts the lie to those promises. The honor becomes a curse. The service becomes imprisonment. The crucial battles never end because the war itself never ends. And the worst part is that the warrior cannot even protest, cannot refuse this fate, because by the time he's placed in stasis, the choice has been taken from him. What does this say about the Imperium's treatment of its heroes? About the nature of duty in a civilization that quite literally cannot afford to let its greatest warriors rest? The Imperium needs its dreadnoughts, needs the firepower and the wisdom and the simple psychological boost of having ancient heroes march to war. But the cost of this need is measured in the suffering of warriors who have already given everything. And yet, when Maxim fights those orcs, when he stands alone against impossible odds and refuses to yield, there's something undeniably noble in it. He embodies the Imperium's greatest strength, the absolute refusal to surrender, the determination to fight no matter the cost, the certainty that humanity's survival is worth any sacrifice. He is, in the truest sense, a hero, even if the circumstances of his heroism are tragic. For the Orks, this scenario reveals the other side of their seemingly comic nature. Yes, they're funny in their crudity and their simple philosophy of hit it until it works. But they're also terrifying in their adaptability, their numbers, and their sheer persistence. They find this ancient imperial relic, and their immediate response is to try to loot it, to understand it, to use it against its makers. There's an intelligence at work here, genetically encoded, but no less real for that. The scene of Zagfang studying the Dreadnought's severed leg, learning from it, building new weapons based on imperial technology, this shows how dangerous orcs truly are. They're not just random raiders or disorganized mobs. They're a species that can take the best technology in the galaxy and, through a combination of engineering and psychic belief, make it work for them. Give them enough time and resources, and they can match or exceed the output of any other race. Moreover, the way the orc warband grows around the battle site demonstrates how the WH functions as both a cultural and psychic phenomenon. The initial contact draws more orcs, which strengthens the psychic field, which draws even more orcs, creating a positive feedback loop that can snowball into a full-scale invasion. This is how orc empires are born, not through planning, but through the gravitational pull of violence and opportunity. And yet, for all their danger, the orcs are also the most honest faction in 40k. They fight because they love fighting. They loot because they love looting. There's no pretense of higher purpose, no claims of serving a greater good. They are what they are, and they make no apologies for it. In a universe full of factions that justify their atrocities with appeals to duty or survival or the will of their gods, the Orks' simple honesty is almost refreshing. The collision of these two forces, the ancient Imperial hero and the Xenos horde, creates a scenario that's pure 40k in its blend of tragedy, violence, and dark comedy. It's tragic because we see a warrior who has served for millennia forced to fight one last battle he cannot win. It's violent because that's what 40k is, an endless war with no respite and no mercy. And it's darkly comic because there's something absurd about orc mech boys hammering on a dreadnought sarcophagus, while the ancient warrior inside slowly wakes up and realizes he's about to have the worst day in 6,000 years. This scenario also highlights one of 40k's central themes: the futility of individual action in the face of a galaxy-wide war. Maxim is a hero, a legend, a warrior of incredible power and skill. But in the end, he's just one warrior on one world in a galaxy of 1,000,000 worlds. His battle, his struggle, his fate, all of it is a tiny ripple in an ocean of violence. Whether he survives or dies, whether he's rescued or abandoned, the larger war continues unchanged. And yet, that individual action still matters. It matters to Maxim, for whom this battle is everything. It matters to the Stormlords if they arrive in time, preserving a link to their past. It even matters to the Orks, who will tell stories about this fight for generations. The fact that it's small and localized doesn't make it meaningless. In 40k, meaning is found not in changing the galaxy, which is impossible, but in standing firm in your corner of it and doing your duty regardless of the outcome. Conclusion. So what happens when orcs find a dreadnought that's been asleep for 6,000 years? Violence happens, tragedy happens, dark comedy happens. The sleeping giant wakes to a nightmare of Xenos savagery. Ancient Imperial technology clashes with crude but effective orc engineering. A warrior who has served for longer than civilizations have existed faces an enemy that was literally bred for war. The specifics of how it plays out, whether the dreadnought survives or falls, whether the orcs are driven off or victorious, these details are almost secondary to the larger truth the scenario reveals. This is a universe where even death doesn't grant you peace, where ancient heroes are awakened to fight battles they were never meant to see, where Xenos hordes gleefully tear apart sacred relics in search of salvage. It's a universe of eternal war, of tragedy piled upon tragedy, of dark humor found in the most unlikely places. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the image of orc mech boys hammering away at a dreadnought sarcophagus, while the ancient warrior within stirs from his long sleep and prepares to show these Xenos what 6,000 years of service has taught him about the art of war. If you've enjoyed this exploration of this quintessentially 40k scenario, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on what you think would happen in this situation, or share your own stories of dreadnoughts and orcs from the tabletop or the lore. Thank you for watching. And remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, but sometimes that war is more interesting than others.